When the Wildcat Corrections Officers strike ended after 22 days last March, it wasn't like a typical strike ending with concessions on both sides and promises for a better future. More than 2,000 COs were fired for not coming back to work. The National Guard took their place, and there wasn't really a clear path forward. Almost half a year later, COs are exhausted, inmates are isolated, and the prison system is still largely in crisis. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. And the Devlin Inn and Suites, Lake Placid, welcoming families, athletes, and groups to the Olympic Village, offering Adirondack mountain views and dog-friendly accommodations. TheDevlinNY.com.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Wednesday, September 24th. First up, the New York Power Authority's Board of Trustees approved a deal on Tuesday that keeps Alcoa in Massena for at least another decade. Under the newest agreement, the aluminum manufacturer gets 240 megawatts of low-cost power for 10 years. In return, the company has to maintain 500 full-time jobs. That's an increase of 50 positions from the current contract. Alcoa will also have to make $30 million worth of improvements at its plant over the next decade. The contract could be extended for another 10 years if Alcoa invests even more money into its facilities, totaling up to $145 million over the next 20 years. The contract now makes its way to the governor's desk for final approval. Human trafficking has become a serious problem in all places, whether through sexual exploitation, forced labor, domestic servitude, or forced marriage. An event is being held tomorrow night in Ogdensburg to spread awareness and train people to see the signs of human trafficking. Cindy Wilson volunteers with the Gabriel Project in Ogdensburg, where she helps support young people in St. Lawrence County who are pregnant and often in crisis. She spoke with Monica Sandreski.
You know, it's overwhelming when you start listening to some of the things that happen, in our area. Whether, if you're in a renewal house because for domestic violence or assault or whatever, that was overwhelming. But when you start hearing about human trafficking, it's a lot. It's very overwhelming. And it's very powerful when you see how someone will manipulate and groom a victim, and they don't realize it. Young, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a girl. It can be, a young guy. So that's why it's important to learn what the signs are.
For you personally, why is this an important issue?
I am a retired kindergarten teacher, and children are always an issue, very important, and their safety is very important. And we just want children to know, what it looks like to be groomed. We want to protect children, and that's why it's very important that this was presented to schools around so that teenagers, parents, counselors, coaches, and people in education, as well as people in churches that work with youth, realize that this is really in our area and how we can help. It's all about, children and protecting them. When you work with children, and you can see how you see children that are vulnerable. And I think with human trafficking, children that are vulnerable are more apt to become a victim of human trafficking.
The event is Community Voices Against Human Trafficking. It's tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in the auditorium at the Ogdensburg Free Academy. There'll be a Q&A, so Wilson says to bring your questions. SUNY Potsdam's structural deficit is getting smaller, but not at the rate university officials were originally hoping for. WWNY-TV reports the college's structural deficit now sits at $6.5 million, down from $9 million 2 years ago. Officials had hoped it would be down to $3 million now, but they say fewer students living on campus and unexpected technical issues held up their efforts. Since 2023, SUNY Potsdam has cut nearly a dozen programs programs, laid off staff, and implemented changes to courses to get finances under control. The college wants to have most of the debt solved by 2028. New York's prisons are still understaffed, leaving incarcerated people isolated and correctional officers exhausted. As the New York Public News Network's Jimmy Vielkind reports, there's been little improvement since a 3-week wildcat strike earlier this year forced lockdowns at prisons around the state.
Sean Pica has run college programs in New York State prisons for almost 30 years. But since the prison strike last winter, classes keep getting canceled.
Even though the strike is ended, the staffing conditions are worse now than they were before the strike.
The State Corrections Department says there are 2,500 fewer officers and sergeants working in state prisons than before the strike started in February. Guards say morale is low, and the lives of incarcerated people are still disrupted. Lockdowns happen regularly. Programs like the college classes that Pica coordinates are often put on hold so guards can focus on basic operations.
My name is Joseph Desmond.
Joseph Desmond is serving 25 to life for murdering an off-duty firefighter.
Our conditions here in Sing Sing.
He says programming and activities gave him hope.
Anything that would help rehabilitate, anything that would help us feel some type of normality within our lives besides just being incarcerated and locked in a cell in excess of 22 hours a day has been taken away from us.
The Corrections Department says facilities are resuming programming, quote, as staffing levels permit. The department says it's screening more mail to reduce contraband, and it's recruiting new guards. There are also about 3,000 National Guard soldiers deployed throughout the state prison system to help fill staffing gaps. But officers who walked off the job in February still worry about their safety. They say one of the root problems is the 2021 law known as HALT. It restricts how much time people can spend in solitary confinement. Opponents say the law makes it harder to maintain discipline.
They feel like nobody's listening to them and nothing is changing in the prisons.
That's Andrea Dumas. She's the Republican mayor of Malone, a village a dozen miles from the Canadian border that's near 3 prisons. She represents a lot of corrections officers.
We're still having correction officers coming out and telling us how dangerous their atmosphere is at work.
The Corrections Department and unions recently proposed ways to change the HALT law. Their proposal broadens the type of offenses where solitary confinement can be used. Matt Keogh is executive vice president of NISCOBA, the union that represents corrections officers. He supports the proposal.
If you could modify the HALT program so there could be a little more internal discipline, that would be a huge step in the right direction.
The proposal faces an uphill climb. Democratic State Senator Julia Salazar chairs her chamber's corrections committee. She says the HALT law wasn't properly implemented, and it hasn't stopped guards from using solitary as punishment. The law also mandates programming for incarcerated people in solitary confinement. Those requirements were suspended during the strike, and in some places programming hasn't returned. Legal Aid Society attorney Anthony Gemmel is suing the Corrections Department on behalf of several prisoners. He says the department is violating the law by not offering the programs.
Programming is being resumed in dribs and drabs, but there's no firm commitment about when things will return to what HALT requires.
That lawsuit is pending. In Albany, I'm Jimmy Vielkind for the New York Public News Network.
I have for you one of my occasional reminders that you can listen to Story of the Day whenever you want if you subscribe to the podcast version. It's the same as the radio version, except it comes a couple hours earlier and it downloads onto your device for free, so you can listen whenever you want, even in the car without cell service, which is handy, right? Find the Story of the Day podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple, or go to ncpr.org/podcast for details. And if you like listening on the radio at 5:48 every weekday evening, that's just peachy with me. That's fantastic. It's great to have you listening. Thanks. Music today by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh and Paul Meyer of Colton. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.